Hi, everybody, and welcome back to today's episode of Make It Monday. So, for the last 2 weeks, we have been working on modeling and texturing both two glasses, this wine glass and this pint glass. What we are looking to do now is get our scene ready to be able to render. But since we haven't gone over any render settings yet, we're first going to go over a few things that you need to go through to have in your scene to do any rendering tasks while you're working in Blender. A few basic settings to change, a few materials to look out for, certain scene assets that you're going to want to have just to be able to get a good scene working. So let's start looking at that now. Good start, Nick. Good start, Nick. It's nice having my camera back, actually. I do like having that back. Zoom in just a little. Okay. Here we are in Blender. This is a brand new scene, just like as if we were getting started. And this time, we are not going to delete the default cube. The first part of this video, we are going to go over the few things that you need in your scene to be able to get things renderable. So first things first, we want to build our scene out. So for this, we're going to build just something very simple. It's going to be a 2-wall backdrop with a ground plane. So that way we can kind of see how the light is reflecting off of our object. So we're going to do Shift A. We're going to add a plane. We're going to scale it out. Let's go about like that. And we're just going to round these numbers out to 10. Let's see here. There should be a way. There it goes. Okay. So that's 10 meters. Let's go ahead and bring our cube up in our scene. So that way it's sitting on that ground plane. So this is going to be our ground plane for this scene. And so like last week's video, we're going to go ahead and adjust this material to make it a little bit of different color so we know what our scene is looking like. So let's come down here. We're going to add a new material. Maybe. There it goes. And let's go ahead and drop this down to... let's make the ground plane a light blue-ish kind of color like that. And we're not going to play with anything else here. Maybe drop the rough. Nah, we'll put the roughness up a little bit. We want that to be a little bit more matte. And so if I go into our texture preview mode, you can see that that is the texture that we're working with. We'll go ahead and drop that back to solid view so we can just finish building out the scene. I'm going to Shift and D will duplicate an object. So you see here now we have two planes. Now we are going to move this on the x-axis right to the edge. And we're going to hit R and 90. And we're going to hit X. Oops, nope, Y. And that's going to make that upright. And we're just going to move that into our scene here. So we'll go ahead and drop this here. And we're going to make this go up a little bit. Okay. So that's one wall. And let's go ahead and add one more wall to this. So we're going to say Shift D again. We're going to go ahead and move this on the X to about the middle. Now this time we're going to do RZ90. And we're going to, oops, move it on the Y. Just cut it up to that corner. Okay. So now, it's not quite in the corner yet. So now that we have this kind of butted up and it's, kind of crude here, let's scale this up just a little bit more so we have a little bit more to work with. Just like that. Okay. So first things first, we need a scene. And our scene is started here. Oh, actually, before we keep going, I want to make these materials a little bit different. So let's add another material. And we're going to add that to this one here. Perfect. And let's make this wall. So that one was blue. We're going to make that one yellow, a little bit yellow. And we're going to bring this one and make this one a red. Just so we have a good difference between the three colors. Of course, it changed all of them. Come on. What are we doing here? I want you material 2. What's going on? Material 1. Ah, I see. Material 2. And let's get rid of material 1 on that one. And we'll call this material 3. Light blue. Okay. You'll see that affected our cube too, but for the cube, we're going to just add another, we're going to make another material for the cube here. So let's go add, we can go ahead and get rid of this one, do a new material, and we're going to make this one green. Just for the sake of right now, we'll go ahead and adjust this and make this a little bit different here shortly. So first thing we have is our scene. Right now, this is our basic room that we're working with. The next part of our scene that we need is a camera. To render, you have to have a camera in your scene. So in this case, when you first do a basic render or a basic scene, you have a camera in your scene already. So to modify and move this, you can move it just like a regular object. You can hit G, move it around with the scale tool. I'm sorry, with the move tool. You can rotate it on the different axes. Once you grab it, you're able to hit R and rotate it, but it rotates slightly different because it's rotating a special mode. Now, what we're going to want to do though is we want to see what the camera is seeing, so we know what our angles are looking like. So let's go ahead and adjust some of these camera parameters right now. So I'm going to hit Control and then 0 on my number pad. That is going to show us what our camera is seeing. Now I'm also going to drag out another viewport here. And we're going to go ahead and change this to our 3D viewport. And now I'm going to modify my camera while I'm looking at the scene here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this. And we're going to go ahead and... let's see. This is going to be a little fun here. So we're going to go to a top down. And first things first, I want to go ahead and just kind of get this in a good frame here. And now I'm going to actually hit the Move Tool button. Why is that out? Silly thing. And we're going to go ahead and drag this back along this axis just a little bit more. And now we're just going to grab the front of this, maybe, if it lets us. There it goes. And, oh, maybe not. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and rotate this now upwards. And I guess we're going to have to rotate it a little bit to the left. So let's rotate it back this way. We don't want it to spin, though. So let's go back in our top view here, rotate, just like that. And we need it to come back a little bit more. Okay. So that's going to be the position for our camera right now. And that's with the settings that I have set as default. So let's go over some of those settings right now. So if we're going over any of our camera settings, we're going to be in our render properties and our output properties tabs. So let's actually start with the output properties. Go ahead and drop some of these down here. Let's see here. So first things first. In the render properties tab, we want to change this from Eevee to cycles. That's going to let us have a little bit more control over what we're working with. That's outside of the real-time engine. And now that's going to give us more of our options that we can work with here in the image settings and the output settings. So right now our viewport has a certain amount of max samples, has the render settings at a certain amount of samples, and we have our denoiser on. We're going to be going over this in a little bit here. But this is the basic setup here. The other thing that I want to change is I'm going to change this to use my GPU, because that's going to be a little bit better render settings for what we're working with. And to be able to check to make sure that those settings are working, you're going to want to come over here into Edit, Preferences. We're going to go into System. You're going to choose your render engine that you're going to be working with. On Mac, it is slightly different, and you're going to want to select the graphics card you're working with. And then when you change that to GPU compute, it will now be using your GPU over your CPU for rendering. So now let's go into our output settings here. And this is what we were kind of talking about a little bit before. So if we want to adjust how our scene is looking, so say for an example, this was going to be a different resolution. So if I shrink this down here, you'll see that the resolution is shrinking with it. So what I'm going to do here actually is I'm just going to bring this up just a little bit more. And I'm going to raise our camera slightly in the scene. So that way we can kind of view a little bit more of what we're working with here. Just like that. Okay. So it's not quite 1920 by 1080, but we have the frame that we're looking for this. Frame rate, 24 frames per second. That's okay to start. We have the frame amount. And then this is going to be our output directory. But since we're not rendering a whole animation out, we'll be able to just save these one by one as we go. So that's going to be the basics for the camera. Now, step number 2 for rendering is you also are going to want to have lights in your scene. So by default, our scene is already going to have one light. So if I drop this over here into our rendered view by hitting Z and then 8 or clicking on rendered, we can see here that we have our render already with our light, and it's already showing us what is in our scene for that lighting effect. And it looks not bad. It doesn't look bad, but we're definitely going to need some more light in our scene to be able to get a good accurate render. So let's go ahead and add a little bit more detail here. So taking a look at this, we're going to go ahead and select our light, and we're going to go to Object Data Properties. And right now this light is set at 1000 watts. And I think we'll just bump that up just a little bit. Let's go 1500. And that is going to be our kind of area light for the scene. But we want to make sure we have light focusing on this object. This side here and these shadows are too harsh for what we're working on. And there's not enough light on the background yet. So we're going to go ahead and do Shift A. And I'm working on this menu here. Shift A. And we want to add a light. And we're going to do an area light. And you see here in our render view what that light is already looking like. You can see here it's already putting a little bit of effect on there. But we want to angle that up at this. So let's go ahead and get a good angle. And I'm actually going to set this off to the right of our camera a little bit. Bring the size up a little. And I want to rotate this. Now, rotating lights and stuff in a scene is always finicky, but you can kind of tell where it's pointing by this little ball here at the end. Oops. This little ball at the end of the light is going to tell you kind of where things are looking. So let's go ahead and play with this a little bit. Okay, so that's pointing over the light. It's not quite what we're looking for. So let's do R and Z, R and Y. RY, no, doesn't want to do what we're asking. There it goes. That's a little bit better. Okay. And we're going to just go ahead and raise this up. And I want to keep it pointed at that. So we're going to now angle it back down. Okay. And this light's power right now is only 10 watts. So let's go ahead and change that up to 1000 as well. Actually, we could probably drop that down. Let's do 750. And so you can already see that's adding a lot more definition to the shape. It's adding a little bit more definition to those shadows, but it's also not causing too much artifacting in the scene. And it's also lighting up our background a little bit more. If we want to cut those shadows a little bit more, we could probably even add a light back here. That would be known as the hair light or the backlight. To be able to determine those shadows a little bit more. But in this setup, I think this is okay for the examples that we're working with to kind of get an idea of how things are working. So let's continue and talk about what we need next. So to get a good render, there's a few settings that you need to look at. So we're going to go back into our camera. Did I rotate the camera? Hello? Hello? Something's acting a little funny there. Okay. Talk about a facepalm moment. That actually looks kind of cool, though. I know that's not how it's rendering, though. So let's go ahead and hit 0. Oh, maybe I did. Did I accidentally rotate this camera around? No. Something's not right here. Okay. Huh. Now let's play the game of what did Nick do? We'll leave this as it is. I'm not sure what happened there, but the camera is still set. If I go to modify this, we'll see that things are moving. So let's just not touch this viewport right now. But the few things that we need to look at for rendering purposes. So let's go up to our rendering tab. So when you're trying to increase the amount of what's the word? So rendering works in kind of like a box of pixels, right? And it shoots those pixels out based on the lighting in the scene, and it gathers that data based on samples. And that's what these are here. So in our scene currently, in the viewport, it's only trying to render 1024 samples. So if I decrease that amount, so let's say to 500, and I move this around a little bit and hit 0, you'll see here up in the corner, it's only going to render up to 750 samples. So it's not nearly as high as what we had it before. If I reset this back to the default value, it then is going to keep calculating that and start refining that a little bit more. Now, as we look down here, our render settings are going to have a much higher amount because that's when it's actually going to be rendering the amount till either it hits its minimum samples and its maximum samples, or the time limit. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to set our time limit to 60 seconds. So that way we can kind of just work on that a little bit more and have just the time that it works. Because this is a simple scene that we're working with right now, and it doesn't have nearly as many reflections as the other scene does. So this will be able to work here. What we also want to look at is a little bit more information here in the images tab. So this is kind of where we were talking about what our scene's going to look like, the height and... Oh, I didn't even pay attention to the time. Oops, I might need to take a pause. I didn't make dinner. All right, we're going to take a quick pause here. Alrighty, so I made a few tweaks. I adjusted the light a little bit. I changed the color to make it a little bit warmer. We're going to bring that down just a little bit here, more into the orange values, just so we can see a little bit of the difference between the white light. I also increased this light a little bit more, and I'm actually going to bring it up a little bit so we get a little bit more definition between the shadow that this is hitting more, as well as the dark behind it. But again, this isn't the model that we're going to be rendering, but I just wanted to show you guys a little bit about how that lighting setup works. So let's go into some of these settings here. I started talking a little bit about what these sampling values do, and having the max samples and the mid samples for your viewport setup is really important, so that way you can see a good preview here. And actually, if you turn on this denoising value as well, it'll even clean up this even more, so that way you can see a really close, accurate representation of what your render is going to look like at the end, even at a low sample amount. So if I go ahead and turn that back off, you guys can see the noise change between these two menus, which is pretty dramatic. If you can tell, like there's a lot less artifacting or like that pixie dust kind of look in the background there. And that same thing will be applied when you do your full render with this. And we have a pretty sizable size difference between this. So right now it's only about 1024 viewport samples versus almost 4 times that amount for the actual final render. And like I said, setting this for a minute will allow that to have some good clarity, but quicker renders for this test that we're running here. Excuse me. So it's nice to see. So let's go and look at this a little bit here. A few other little quick tips. So say for an example, if we don't like where our camera was ending up, we can actually tell the camera to move to where our viewport is looking. So say for example, I wanted to see a little bit more of this yellow wall than the blue one. So I'm going to actually line my camera up here. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, and I'm going to hit Control, Alt, and 0. And that is going to set the camera up. So looking at this, it's a little high. So I need to go ahead and just get back into my 3D view here. I'm going to shift things down a little bit. And I'm going to kind of angle this. I want to be able to see all 4 sides, or all 3 sides here. I'm going to back up just a little bit again. Control, Alt, and 0 on the numpad. And that's a little bit more of kind of what I was looking for. So you can see a little bit more of that shadowing effect here, as well as we can see the difference in the light hitting it. Okay. So now when you actually want to go to render, there's a few buttons that you can hit to do that. You can come up here to the top toolbar. You can say render and then render image, or like it says right here, you can hit F12 and that will also render this. So we're going to go ahead and do a quick render on this, and I'm going to have to watch my capture to see if it works. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to cut ahead and kind of stop things and play around. So just bear with me. But I should be able to talk to you guys a little bit while this is rendering. So you'll see here already, based off of these settings here, I can kind of go through a little bit of this. At the top here, it shows you the current time, how long it's going to take to finish the amount of samples that you're working with, how many samples are already being rendered versus what's already finished. And as well as the amount of memory that the scene has that it's working with. So say if we had a more complex scene, a lot more lighting and a lot more features, it's going to take a lot more time for it to actually render this out. And you'll already see here that it's already finished by the time I was explaining that. And you can see based off of our viewport here, what the difference is between the clarity. You can see there's a lot more graininess on here, but that's mostly from this denoise threshold. So if I turn denoise off again here, and we open this menu back up, let's go ahead and run another render. And we'll be able to see the difference here between 1 minute versus the actual denoise properties that are here. And it seems to be doing a pretty good job. And again, this isn't a very high detailed render, so it's not going to be doing a lot of information here. Yeah, you can see how fast that this is going here. So we're hitting 4,000 samples way before that whole minute mark hits, which is really good. So we can go ahead and close that out. And so say for an example, the black background is nice, but say we wanted a little bit more natural light in our scene. We can actually do that by setting what's called an HDRI map to the scene. So what we want to do is we want to go to our scene properties and we want to set up a background scene. No, I'm sorry. Let me step back for a second. It's the world properties that we're working for. And we're actually going to be looking for the background. What we want to do is we want to add a color, but we want to do that color as a, let's see, that's going to be an environment texture instead. So you can already see that the renderable scene is trying to look for that background image, but there's nothing in the scene yet. So you can see there's a lot of bleed, a lot of purple coming through because that's what it's trying to use for the environment. So let's go ahead and add one of those. So we're going to go ahead and open a file up, and I actually have some of these saved on my working disk here. So let's go into 3D modeling, and I should have a, they're not IESs, they are called HDRI maps is what we're looking for. Let's go into maps here. Nope. Let's see, where did those go? Oh, probably under asset collection. Here we go, HDRI maps. And we're just gonna grab, I'm not sure which ones these are, but let's go ahead and grab this Preller Drive 2K HDR texture. Go ahead and open that up. And you can see here that the HDRI map is changing a lot of the values in the background here. It's due to this being an actual image that's in the background. So if I zoom this out, you guys can see here the difference in the background that it's working with and how it's affecting the light in our scene. So say for an example, if I was to hide our area light for the time being and just minimize that, you can see it's being affected way more by the scene light versus the light that we have. And this has its own properties as well. So if we go into this world settings here and say we wanted to give this a little bit more strength. So say we want this to be affected by a matter of 5. You can see that's turned up a lot more. We're getting a lot more of this light effect on the side here. That's because the sun of the scene or the higher light values of the scene are coming from these or lights in the back. So you can see how it's affecting our scene coming out this way. So let's go ahead and turn that back down. Let's set that to a value of 1.5. I think we needed a little bit more there, and we're going to turn our area light back on. Oh, it is already on. Perfect. So that's good. So now let's go ahead and render this, and we'll see what the difference looks like here a little bit. And you guys can already tell that even with that extra lighting effect in here in the background, it's taking a lot longer to render these samples out. It probably will still finish within this 45 seconds, but we're kind of watching it here to see what it's doing. The last render was 20 seconds. This one has already taken 28 seconds to go through. So it's probably going to use the whole minute, and it probably won't grab all of the samples. So you can see here, we're getting close to the end. We're about 10 seconds away, and we haven't nearly hit that 4,000 mark yet, but the scene is looking really good. We have a little bit more spread of the light. We have a little bit more of a gradual change in the shadowing here because of the different lights in the scene. The object itself has a little bit more definition, and you can still see bleed through this. It's because I overlapped those blocks a little differently, but that took the entire minute for it to render, actually a little bit longer than a minute to do that. And it looks good. It does. It comes out very nicely, but it still's not quite what we were looking for. But for the sake of this demo, it's perfect because it's a way to test some of these render settings. And there's some other volume information here that you can apply to this. So say, for example, you can change the amount of sampling that you want this background to be able to work with as well as how it displays in the viewport. You can also determine and change this material. So say I didn't quite like how this one came out. I can hit browse here again, and let's choose this flower hillside now. So you can see that this one is a way stronger of a background, and it's overpowering the scene quite a bit. So let's actually drop this back down to 1, and we can actually turn down our area light in the scene here as well. So let's go drop down to here. Let's drop that down to 500. The exposure value is actually down in the film settings under the render settings. That's what I was kind of looking for here. So if we drop this exposure value down just a little bit, it'll keep still the general lighting in the scene, but it's going to bring that exposure value down. So it'll give us a little more of a realistic look to this. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what this is doing. So you can see here, it's giving us a little bit more of a break in the shadows. It's giving us a little bit more of the realistic look of how the light's hitting it. But it still's a little dark. So I think it's because we also changed the world scene. So let's go ahead and bring that back to 1 now that we've lowered that amount. Let's try rendering that one more time. We need to escape this actually first. Go ahead and hit, we can hit F12 as well, which is what I'm looking for. I'm finger picking for that on the keyboard now. So yeah, that's working pretty well as well. It's giving us a nice break in the shadows, but also a little bit more of a lively look, which is nice. So this is just a basic scene. So now we're going to go into our glass cup scene, and we're going to try to emulate this a little bit. We're not going to do the same kind of wall method just yet, but we're going to just add a ground plane, and we're going to throw some lights in the scene just so we can kind of get a look and a feel for what the camera is doing. So we'll see you in just a second with that. Okay. So we're in our scene with our pint glass and our wine glass. And I already have a few lights in the scene from the default, so I'm going to delete that here. And we're going to go ahead and just kind of line these up a little bit. So again, this is with our glass material. And we're also going to add a HDRI to this scene, so that way we can show you guys what that looks like with the actual environment light in the background. So let's go ahead and set our camera first. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. I kind of want I want the wine glass in front, kind of like what I had on the right side there. So let's go ahead and set this up here. And I'm going to hit Control-Alt-0. And it looks like that our camera settings are a little off. So let's go down here and we're going to adjust this up a little bit. We're going to try to make that a little bit more square. So that way we have a little bit of a better resolution that we're working with for this kind of a scene. And I'm actually going to rotate the camera down just a little bit. And I think I'm also going to zoom in just a little bit more here. Nope, too much. So I got to do like 2 clicks out. And rotate back down. Okay, so let's start with that. That's going to be a good angle for our camera. So we're not going to play with the camera anymore. So we have a light in our scene. And I have that set to 1500 at a good light value there. Our material for the ground plane is just a standard white. So let's go ahead. I'm going to change that just a little bit so we can see that effect happen. As you can see, this is what it looks like with just the shaded view of what these materials look like because of the low roughness value that we have. But that is see-through, as we know from our previous video. So let's just bring that down just a little bit there too. And we want to add probably one more light in the scene just to kind of get a little bit of a back shadow here. So let's do Shift A, and we're going to do a light. And let's do another area light, kind of like before. Let's go ahead and bring that up. And we're going to bring that over here. Let's do the X, and then G. Oops, I did something. G and then Y. Bring that over here. Let's rotate this. Nope. Rotate it. Oh, come on here. Okay. It's been a minute since I've had to do a lot of the lighting stuff. So I'm very happy that I get to show you guys how this stuff works. But it all is a little different, so it's always really cool to see. how this is going to end up. And that is not pointing at all in the direction that I want it to. Can I just grab this? See, we can kind of grab and drag that point to kind of angle this light a little bit better for us. So we're going to throw that in the middle here. Let's put it between both, just like that. And we want to increase that value to probably like let's see, we'll do 1,000. So if we go into our rendered preview here, now this might slow some things down because we're actually going to be looking at the camera settings with this glass material. So bear with me. Want to make sure we're on GPU composite. And for the sake of this, we're going to turn the denoise on as well. So we can kind of see what this is going to look like when we actually render things out. So that lighting value is looking really good. We're seeing the reflections come up off our glasses and they're hitting the cups in a really nice way. But what we want to do is we want to add a little bit of that environment light in the background too, so we can kind of get an idea of how that's going to look. So let's go ahead and turn denoise back off for a second. And what we're going to do is we're going to add that environment light. So we're going to come over here to the environment tab. We're going to add a color to the background. Actually, do I need to change this? No. Okay. This one is where I need to environment texture. We're going to do open. And we're going to go back to my asset collection here. And we're going to throw in an HDRI. Let's do this Table Mountain one. I'm not sure what that one looks like. Oh, see, that looks pretty nice. I like how that's affecting that already. And I'm actually going to turn that up just a little bit. We can get a little bit more brightness in that scene there. Great. That's looking good so far. So now if we turn this denoise value on, we can kind of get an idea in our viewport by itself to see how that's going to kind of look when everything's all rendered out here. And you can see how the cups are being affected by the glass shader as well as by the lights from our scene. We can see the reflections of the glass from the light, as well as how the light is bouncing off the scene and hitting these reflections. And the fact you can see the glass and it's deforming through the other one is really cool as well. So let's go ahead and actually render this image out and see how it comes out. And based off the render settings that I had previously when I was doing testing with this, I had this set to 2 minutes in the render. So just bear with me. I'm going to scoot ahead here when this is all finished. So I'm going to jump back in here. There's only about 30 seconds left of the render out of the 2 minutes that we are working with. And you guys can already see, and I don't have denoising turned on for this render, but you can see some of the artifacting that you get when you don't have that denoise modifier on. But when you adjust these render settings and you actually set those time limits and have things up at a little higher, it takes more time and sits down and does this. Now, for still rendering, setting a time limit is a good thing, so that way you can kind of do some tests and do some basic things. That's also nice why we have the viewport settings how we do. But being able to actually render and sit and look at this and see what it looks like in real time. So that just finished. That's our 2 minutes and 1 second. So you can see there's still a little bit of noise in here, and there's a little bit of noise down, especially where it refracts off the bottom here. And I really do like how the wine glasses base came out. I think we spent a lot of good time on that one. The pint glass, I think I did a little bit of extra work too after the video was over to kind of even that out in the bottom. And there is a little bit of artifacting here that I can see on the pint glass as well. And I'm not sure if that's from the refraction of the translucence modifier that we added on here, or if it's just the general look of things. But this is how the render is coming out right now. So that is the basics of how to render a 3D model like this, and how to do some basic Blender tasks in Blender. So please keep continuing to watch us here on Make It Monday with this Blender Basics series. We are going to continue working with our glass cups, as well as modeling a little bit more in-depth projects here. We are going to be moving on to the next stage of this project, which is going to be actually creating a small kitchen scene where we'll be having an open cabinet above kind of like a sink countertop area. And we are going to show you guys how to model and work with something like that. So make sure you keep watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to Facepalm Studio here. If you have any questions or anything that you guys would like to see us model or make, please leave them up here with Facebook and Twitter. Or if you'd like to leave them in the comments below, I'd be happy to answer your guys' questions. I hope you enjoyed the first part of this series, and I can't wait to show you guys more. So until then, keep creating, save the pain. We'll see you guys in the next video.